Welcome back to the Always Reading Book Club. It is your girl Kiki Reader, and we are diving back into our Rochester series by Skye Warren. Now, if you haven't listened to the first book review in that series, that link is going to be available down below in the description section. Once you listen to that, come and join us as we dive into book 2, which is called Strict Confidence. Jane's having a bad dream, well, a nightmare would be probably more appropriate. She feels like these angels, or maybe demented angels, demons, are like pulling her, and she's trying to wake up, and someone's kind of tugging at her, and someone's telling her be calm, and she realizes she's in a hospital. The nurse says about texting her handsome man because he requested to be texted as soon as she woke up. And the nurse, who's a guy, he says he's probably going to be up here shortly. He's only 2 floors down, but he won't even take the elevators. And, like, sure enough, he pops in. And keep in mind, poor man, he already had his leg. It was already, like, hurt from before. And now it's got to be probably completely messed up. So Rochester pops in, and she's got all these things in her head. Like, she wants to ask him, when he said that he loved her and all this type of stuff, if, like, did he mean it? But the way he's looking at her, it seems like he's mad at her. And so she says to him she's sorry for going in there, but he's just like, you're a liar. And then he said something about, what was it? Knowing that she would have gone back in there to try and save him so that Paige didn't lose another family member. So even though she says, I'm sorry for going in, he knows she doesn't mean it, knows that she would have went in there every time because she wouldn't have wanted Paige to not have close blood. He says, well, we're checking out today. And so she automatically assumes that he's saying that just him and Paige are checking out. And she immediately has this memory of when she was in foster care and her case manager was supposed to come and pick her up to take her to a new home. And the woman was terribly late. It's Houston. It's hot. She's like drenched in sweat. It was awful. She felt so alone. And so she says to him, it's okay. I'll be okay on my own. And he just looks at her like, what the hell? Like, where is that coming from? But it's like, you got to know where it's coming from. She has abandonment issues. It's totally understandable. We switch to Rochester's POV. He's looking at her like he can't believe that she would even think that he would leave her. And he's like, no, you're coming with us. He's like, Paige needs you. And then it hits her. And he feels bad because he knows he's a bastard because he didn't say, like, I need you. You know what I mean? And he knows the stuff that he said in the fire. But the way he's acting towards her, it's almost like what he said didn't even happen. And so he knows he can't pursue anything with Jane. Paige has got to be the focus. She needs him alive. And so with the fire, he wants to just act as if he was never in Jane's bed. I don't know how he's going to do that, but that's what he thinks he needs to do. So then he tells her, that's when he says to her that, I'm no good for you, and that, sex is off the table. We can't do that anymore. And she just says, okay. So then the doctor comes in, Dr. Gupta, and she's telling her, asking how she feels. She says she's tired. The doctor says, you're going to feel like that for a few weeks. You're going to need help getting out of the bed. And he says, we're leaving this afternoon. And Dr. Gupta's like, what do you mean? He's like, we're leaving. So you do whatever you need to do to her now, because this afternoon we are checking out. I did forget this part. He did tell her before saying she was coming with them, he did say that if she wanted to go back to Houston, he would let her terminate her contract and he would give her a sizable bonus. She's like, I don't need a bonus. And he was like, if your boss offers you a bonus, you take the damn bonus. Detective Joe Causey comes in, questions Jane, and he's very, very accusatory towards her. Asking her why did she take this job and what kind of relationship does she have with Rochester, all this type of crap. And it just seems very weird, his line of questioning, even though she about the fact that they were fucking around, she does leave that out because she could feel that he wasn't a person that could be trusted. She doesn't have a great rapport with like cops, authority figures, and things like that based upon her experiences in foster care. And so she doesn't know if it's based upon that or if he's genuinely just not a good person. But she's gonna stick with what her gut is telling her. He's asking her, well, since it was your day off, because she explained she was off that day and that, Rochester and Paige were playing in the kitchen. He had made her food and all this type of stuff. He's like, well, did you go back in the kitchen and cook something? You could have left the stove on. And she realizes he's trying to insinuate that she's the one that started the fire. And he's like, maybe you're upset because of a lover's quarrel. You know, he's trying to find out what the hell they had going on in that house. And I'm like, well, why does he care so much, first of all? Because this doesn't sound like you really care about the fire. You're trying to find out what was going on in the home. And don't get it twisted. I understand with an investigator, you want to try and figure stuff out. I get that. But how sometimes you can just kind of tell this seems more of a personal level, the way he's questioning her. And she, of course, feels so uncomfortable. She hears a bunch of rumble outside, and then Rochester busts through the door, and he tells Joe to get the fuck away from her. The Joe guy is all calm and collect, and we find out that they grew up together, and Joe was a bully, and Rice, his brother, was friends with Joe, and so he would watch Joe beat up on Bo. We'll say Bo and Rochester. You'll just hear me saying both of those names. I'll float back and forth between the two. So I'm like, well, his brother seems like trash anyway, right? So the fact that you would do that to your own sibling is crazy as shit to me. But clearly there's some stuff going on. This guy has jealousy issues because he was going off about, how much, money he had made and thinking he could get off doing anything he wanted. Just all kind of crap. So he tells him, you don't ask her any more questions. You don't ask Paige any questions. You have any questions, you come to me. Kicks him out. He's been to the house. She could smell the smoke on him. And she says, where are we going to go? Since the house is considered a crime scene because they're saying it could possibly be arson. So they can't even start doing repairs. And so Mateo's found them a place that they can stay in. And so that's where they're going to go. They leave out. Mateo's out front. He has a black Escalade waiting for them. Rochester gets in with Paige. The nurses bring out Jane. He's upset because he was going to go back up and get her. And Jane's like, no, this is better. She says hi to Paige. But Paige she's so withdrawn. She's not herself at all. She won't even speak to Mateo. Mateo tries to talk to her. She won't talk to him. So then Mateo helps Jane get in the vehicle. He's saying funny stuff. And, how he's a superhero. It's like, I thought you did it in movies. And they're having this little banter back and forth. And this, of course, is upsetting Rochester. But he can't say anything because you just told a girl you can't do nothing with her. So you feeling some type of way, but it's like, how you gonna really say something? They head out, and then Paige says she's hungry. She wants to eat now. She wants to go home. She wants mac and cheese. So he explains to her that they're going to the inn and they're not able to go home. There's police tape. It's a crime scene. She doesn't want to hear it. She keeps saying, I want to go home. I want to go home. So finally, Jane reaches back, puts her hand on hers, and just says Paige. And there was just so much in her just saying her name. Like, she knows she wants to go home, and Jane's like, I know you want to go home, but you feel safe when you're home, but unfortunately we can't go home. And she asked her, why is it that you want to go home so bad? And she says, because then mommy will know where to find me. And I'm like, oh shoot, if that woman is still going to be some mess. So then she holds on to Jane's hand, and Jane tells her, wherever you go, your mother will always find you. You know, no matter where you are, your mother will always find you. And then Paige breaks, she starts crying. So Jane has her a tear coming out of her eye, but at the same time she's worried because if someone did, set fire to the house, that meant someone was probably trying to take them out, and they're still out there. So this is a problem. They get to the Lighthouse Inn, and we find out he's bought the whole place out. So it's just going to be Rochester, Jane, Paige, and Mateo that are going to be living there. So when Mateo says he's going to get some clothes for Jane and Paige, um, Jane's like, I have clothes, but all of her stuff got burned. And that was all the stuff she had. And that's so sad. And she's about to break. And Paige is actually the one to say, they all got burned in the fire. Uncle Bo explained it to me. So then she gets it together and she tells Mateo, thank you for doing that. And she's like, she's going to pay Rochester back whatever Mateo buys. Because she doesn't want to feel like she owes him something, because it makes her feel like a whore. So they go upstairs. Later on, Mateo brings the clothes. They're really nice. But even though they're like t-shirts and things, are like high quality. So they're like really, very soft. And the prices on them are crazy. And so Paige has clothes as well, but she doesn't like them. They're all wrong for her. And he had gotten her girly stuff, but there's no black outfits in there or anything like that, because she likes to have things that have like Monopoly on them. She likes her little black tutu. So the girl has a level 10 meltdown, and she winds up screaming at Jane, and Jane tries to calm her down. She's telling Jane, I don't belong here. And she starts yelling, you're not my mother, basically telling Jane, she says to Jane, you don't belong here either. And so that's when Rochester comes in and tells her, he yells, Paige Louise Rochester, you apologize to her right now. Paige says no. And he says, again, you better. And the girl just lets out another visceral scream. We switch back to Rochester's POV, and we find out that she screamed and hollered for quite a while. And finally, what made her calm down was just kind of Jane holding her. Eventually, she ate like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, went to sleep later on. He's in the shower. He's thinking about Jane. His dick's hard. He hears a knock on the door. It's Jane. He can see her breasts through the shirt, because Mateo got the wrong size bras, so she doesn't have a bra on. So she comes in the room because she wanted to ask him about the fire, and basically asked, like, did someone do it? And he's just like, it's a possibility. She's like, I don't need you to talk to me like I'm Paige, like I'm an adult. You need to tell me what's going on. And he's, trying to protect both of them. But then he just became consumed with lust, winds up kissing her. They didn't do it because, the whole thing of him telling her, can't do this, blah, blah, blah. But I'm like, but you started this shit. But anyway, I digress. So he's just like, he needs to keep her and Paige safe. And so he knows this isn't a good idea for them to fuck. So he stops it. The next day she wakes up, Bo's gone. But he left a note along with his black Amex, basically saying whatever you need to go online and get it. So she starts looking up different Monopoly clothing, like on Etsy, and just trying to find a good amount of stuff for Paige. She can't find the regular Monopoly board game. They know it's probably not going to be salvageable. Well, if it's at the house, I'm sure it's burnt to a crisp. And so she's hoping to try and find something that's at least close to the game, because the girl needs some type of normalcy. And if she doesn't, you don't want her spazzing out again, right? So then Bo comes back, and he's got a box of what he could get from the house. He also brought the kitten back from the vet, and thankfully the kitten's all well. Nothing was really wrong with it. And the things that he did bring back from the house, they can be washed. However, the picture of her family is gone forever. So she had a picture of her dad, and it's gone. She used to carry it around with her in her trash bags, because that's how she would move her clothes. And it's gone. So when she tells him about it, he, of course, is like, I promise I'll find it. She's like, don't make promises. You know, she, of course, is still worried about what happened with that fire, wants to know if there's more information. He says the fire chief is going to wrap up the investigation in a couple days. And he tells her about Joe Causey, and that he's probably going to come back and, try and question her again. She doesn't trust him. Um, but I mean, if he comes, they're going to have to talk to him eventually. So, I mean, that's just kind of how it is. She does say, she wants to protect Paige, blah, blah, blah. Paige is napping. Rochester says you need to rest. She's like, that's not something a boss would would tell to me. Um, she says to him about him saying that he loved her, and he's told her, my love is dangerous. And he, of course, is like, you've got to understand where I'm coming from. But she says, but what I really want to know again is who it was that started that fire. Like, that's what she really wants to know. Like, if he has any idea of who it could have possibly been. The following day, Jane wakes up. She's feeling a little bit closer to normal, but her bruises are like green, so she's starting the healing process. Marjorie, who's the innkeeper, she's taking the day off, but she's gotten them a ton of stuff so they can, have whatever they want. Paige wants pancakes. She wants them drowned in syrup. Um, and this is like the closest kind of with her getting out of her withdrawn state. So hey, if that's what it'll take, it drown it in the syrup. Paige asks him if he wants any. He looks like he wants to say yes, but then he says no. He goes upstairs, closes the door. Later on, Mateo comes in. He's coming in from a swim, so he's just got a towel wrapped around the bottom of him, and he's all glistening and everything. I mean, he is a movie star, and he's a sexy guy. So she notices, she sees, and they flirt. It's like a little flirting thing they do. It's just like he's charming. It's natural to him. So when Mateo makes a statement about, you should see what's beneath the towel, Bo comes down those stairs and he's like, what is it that she should see? And he was like, no, I'm just talking about being outside. The water's not as bad as she's thinking. It's not that cold, X, Y, and Z. So now, of course, he wants pancakes. And he's having this extremely possessive moment. And he's about to do something reckless, but he doesn't. Um, he's just in a crazy state of mind. And reading this was absolutely hilarious. That night, Bo hears this wailing scream. And of course, he thinks it's Paige. So he goes to her room, but she's asleep, and the kitten's looking at him like, why are you bothering us? And then he hears it again. He knows it's Jane. So he goes to her room. He's having this complex about just going in, but she keeps wailing. So he goes in, tries to wake her up. And when he does, she's like, he had asked her what the dream was about. She said it was about you and the fact that she couldn't leave him. Um, and he, of course, he's always turned on. He wants to make her come. And so he starts, you know, rubbing on her cooch, starts fingering her, and then made her come that way. And then she rode him, and they had a hard fuck that way. So after their session, she does have a lot of energy. She wants to talk. She's in talk mode, right? And so basically, she's like, you know my secrets, let me know yours. So the first thing he tells her is that he hates lobsters. She's like, really? That's your secret? He's like, I've never told anybody that. So basically, lobsters are bottom feeders. And the butter is what helps take the taste away from the chemicals and all that type of crap. So Jane, and then he tells her that he likes boxer briefs. They're perfect for him. And she's like, that's not what I'm talking about. Let's talk about something real, Like, I want to know, tell me about Emily. He tells her how Emily was basically different. Everyone wanted her. She had a certain air about herself. She did want more than just to be, some lobster man's wife. And so that is why he set out to make tons of money. He had given her his senior ring when he left to go to LA. And they never went past second base while he was in high school and stuff. So they had never fucked. But I think he was more so in love with the image of who she was, right? That whole thing of everyone wanting her, but I get her. That complex a lot of people have and get fucked up. I think that, I think that's what it was. The mystery of her, the elusiveness and the fact that everyone wanted her. I think that's what he was in love with. Especially since he was son of a lobsterman. They didn't make a ton of money, so they weren't considered rich. So I think it was more of that whole complex guy. So we also find out that Joe Causey is Emily's brother. Ain't that a blimp? um, he goes to LA. He feels like it was foolish, but he still hopes she would have waited for him. But then she winds up getting engaged to his brother and they get married. And then after a while, one night Emily comes to him and says that she's divorcing Rice. And he knew it wasn't true, but he still fucked her anyway. He felt awful about it, and he never spoke to his brother again. He felt so guilty. And we find out that when the boating accident occurred, the doctor had deemed him like brain dead, and he had to make the decision to pull the plug. But he never even confessed, even while he was in a coma, what he had done. He doesn't tell Jane what he read in the diary of Emily, which was that how awful his brother was to Emily. So because of what he read in there, he's glad he's dead. So she's trying to make him not feel bad about what happened. You made a mistake. You felt guilty about it. All this type of stuff. And it's awful. How do I say this? I mean, it is awful, right? You fucked the girl. She was still married to your brother. Yes, she was apparently supposed to be with you first, but she couldn't wait for you. And so she made a decision, and then the decision turned out to be trash, right? So yeah, you were wrong for fucking her. I'm gonna say that. But I think what gets me is the guilt he feels. Like, if he would have come back for her sooner, and she wouldn't have married him, and then she wouldn't be dead, and all this blame he's putting on himself. It's kind of like she made a decision. So if she was so in love with you like she claims, why would she go and fuck with your brother? You know what I'm saying? That's the part that makes me it's still fucked up. If Rice did anything horrible to her, that's still fucked up. But at the same time, why would you put yourself in that situation? And a part of me feels like you kind of did it because you knew it would hurt him more, because you didn't go get anybody else. You went and got his literal brother and married him. That's fucked up. Later on, he leaves her, goes downstairs. Mateo's on the phone with his agent, basically trying to hold out for like the max amount for this sequel. And he finds out that Marjorie received a phone call with a message, and it basically said, you're going to ruin her basically the way you ruin, it says you're going to ruin her the way you ruin me. So they're thinking it came from Zoe Aldridge. Um, and I guess initially the person that, then they start talking about this whole thing with like custody of Paige. So initially, all of his money was supposed to go to Mateo because they were best friends in in L.A. But he changed his will, and Mateo never even knew about it. And because Joe Causey is Paige's uncle, he was trying to get custody of Paige. And you wonder, is it because that's your sister's kid, or is it because you want access to that money? Because this is billions we're talking about, right? This is a different level. So it's kind of like the plot is thickening, because now, was it Joe that set that fire? You know what I'm saying? Because this is starting to look kind of so suspect of what's going on, because it had to be someone that has uh some type of gain from doing it. So again, the plot thickens. The next day, Jane's looking through the box of stuff from the house, and damn near everything's been singed. But what wasn't singed was that freaking diary of Emily's. She reads it, and the first page she reads it saying how P and R and her went out for a picnic. It was really nice. It almost felt like a real family. Then later on, she reads that R hit her, and she doesn't know what came over him. Then later on, she reads that B is actually the father of P. So this, of course, rattles Jane. She even read in there where Emily was saying that, she puts up with, how did she put it? That P looks just like him, and I think R knows it. And so she goes outside. She looks like she's about to throw up. Marjorie, we find out, was actually friends with Emily as well. They weren't best friends, but they were friendly with one another. So Mateo tells her, I'll watch Paige. You can go upstairs and rest. She's like, no, 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 I just need some air. So she goes outside. Rochester's out there, and she blatantly asked him about what was in the diary. And he says he knew that Paige was possibly his, because it was like 8 months after she was born, and Emily seemed happy. Wait a minute, let me say it correctly. He found out 8 months after Paige was born that it was a possibility that could be his kid. But Emily seemed happy in her life, and he didn't want to disturb anything, so he never said anything. And then he starts off with the whole thing about feeling like this was his fault because he possibly knew that this was his child and he didn't go and get him, you know? So he has that guilt that he's feeling. So to him, he didn't save her. So either way, it's his fault. So she's trying to convince him that it's not. But he just can't see it that way. And then he starts saying stuff about money and that, you're only staying because you need the money and all this type of stuff. He just starts being cruel, telling her that he didn't love her. It's just something he said in the moment. Just completely crushed and broke the girl's heart. Felt so freaking bad for her. I really did, because it wrecked her to hear that. Rochester has free reign over the place now, the coach house, because they've gathered whatever evidence that they could, and the investigation concluded it's been ruled an arson. The chief, the fire chief, that's how you say it. I'm finna say the firefighter. I don't know what I was gonna say, but the fire chief, he and Joe Causey, they come up, and they say that the fire started in one of the upper rooms. he hasn't been in that room probably ever. So he's kind of like, okay, like, wait a minute, the heck is going on? And the place is so massive, someone could probably live there for months or years. You know what I'm saying? And you wouldn't know because you're not going to go to every inch of the house. It's just not going to happen. So they think it's a woman based on the accelerant that they found, which is weird, but that's what they said. Apparently, it's like they weren't trying to kill. It's like they were trying to flush someone out. So the chief is like, um, well, first the Joe guy says, when's the last time you saw Emily? And Rochester's just kind of like, what are you talking about? I have not seen her in years. She is dead. Let it go, And apparently they never found her body, and the chief thinks it's her because Rochester says, she didn't like water. It made her seasick, and it wouldn't have made sense for them to go out on a boat. It just wouldn't have made sense. So the chief doesn't want to fully say it, but he's like, maybe I'm getting old and I probably should retire, but I think it's a possibility that it was her, And then it's starting to make sense to me of why that little girl said, Mommy, how is Mommy going to know where to come and visit me? Right? Except for the fact that her mama probably been coming to visit her. So I think it's Emily. And the fire chief thinks it's a possibility. It's Emily, but he also says it's a possibility. He's not leaving out Joey Causey either. Jane is helping Paige take a bath. She loves his bathtub now. She thinks it's like a pool. They bought a bunch of bubbles and toys and stuff, so now this is her happy place, and she absolutely loves it. She wants to keep staying in the tub. She keeps saying, "Give me 10 more minutes," So Jane's thinking about the conversation that she had with Bo on the beach. It absolutely ripped her apart. She feels like total crap. And when Bo comes and she sees him in the hallway, there's like this pull towards her and she to him. So it's like, even though he said all the stuff that he said, like the way he looks at her is not of someone who just said all the bullshit that he says. So he winds up grabbing her and kissing her and stuff, and she winds up getting off by just rubbing on his leg. I am laughing because the first book she got off on his shoe, rubbing on his shoe. And now she's getting off rubbing on his leg. It's hilarious to me. But anyway, I digress. So she, of course, was like, wait, because she wanted to know, like, what did you find out? And while she's coming, he tells her that it was arson. This freaks her out. That means someone was in the home, and she's thinking like, oh my gosh, was someone listening to them at the door? She got like 30,000 thoughts like running through her head. So he leaves, goes in his room because Paige winds up yelling for Jane because she's ready to get out the tub. And she asks if she can have some milk. And she's like, of course, sure, no problem. And then she's like, can we play Monopoly tomorrow? And she's like, yeah, we can do that. But what she also saw before he came is that she saw someone in a white nightgown walking on the beach. And when she went to look back, she didn't see him anymore. They had blonde hair. I say, this is Emily. Emily's ass is alive. But the way the person was gone so fast, she thinks she saw a ghost. So I'm like, oh my gosh, this is just a whole mess. Now I have a little rant right now because my thing with him is it's the constant back and forth. Like, he doesn't want her. Well, deep down, okay, we know that he wants her. We know that he's telling her no because he thinks it's for her protection, right? We get that. But he keeps doing the complete opposite. Like, he keeps mind fucking that girl. And that's what's annoying to read. Because it's like you got all these thoughts, and it's like at some point, even if you have this strong pull towards someone, you've got to make a decision. So if you think it's best to like stay away from her. It's about her safety. That should outweigh whatever else you claim you got going on, right? It should. And you should let her go. It's going to be painful as fuck, but you should probably do it. But you keep going to her like you just can't live without her, and then you crush her. And it's like that's just too much mind fucking. It's just too much. And she's 19. This is like her first real interaction um with a man, really, and of course with deep feelings and things like that. It's a lot. And I feel bad for her because she just knows she feels this and she doesn't want to let go of it, and that's what I would expect from a 19-year-old, right? But he 36, so I expect him to have some more control. Rochester goes into the kitchen. Marjorie's there. She seems a little uneasy, but he's trying to ask her more questions about the message that was left. Like, was there possibly voices in the background? Anything. But we find out her intention was not even to give him the message. And she felt like the message was very disturbing. She states she doesn't remember hearing any voices or anything like that. She just said, she figured because of all of the heartbreaks that he had been doing, because again, the tabloid, she had seen him with all the different women. She assumed it was one of those. And she goes into this ramble about how it is his fault that Emily's dead, because if he would have never left, then she wouldn't have married his brother. But that's a hell of a statement to make. Like, if y'all were so crazy about each other, why in the hell didn't she come out there with them, or eventually come out there with them? Or if that's who she wanted and didn't want nobody else, okay, so then she could have waited. Or why did you have to choose his brother? Like, I feel like, again, she made that choice to really stick it to him. But it's like he went out there because he wanted to be rich and powerful for her, to prove that he was better than just a lobster man, right? So I'm just kind of like, you know, that's a lot to put on him, to say it's his fault she's dead. No, she made a choice. And those are the actions from her choice, you know? Now, I can kind of understand him beating himself up about the fact that once he knew that there was, well, he didn't know the issues. He just thought she was leaving, because she never said like he was beating on her or anything like that. So he didn't know that part. He didn't read the diary until like she was already dead. Well, she was already dead at that point. So he didn't know anything about that. So I don't know. Even with that, like, how was he supposed to come in and rescue you? But if it doesn't really seem like you're in a bad marriage, you just married somebody you didn't necessarily love and want. Well, that's your goddamn choice. You got to live with your choices. Now, if he wanted to go after her, he could have. And he sounds like he wanted to, but he didn't want to do anything to his brother. But I'm like, dude, you already fucked the girl. So, I mean, you're already screwed. So it's kind of like, just put both your feet in the bullshit at this point, you know? But I didn't like the fact that the Marjorie woman was saying that to him. That's a lot to put on a person. That is, I don't feel like that's his fault. I really don't. And I just don't. That's my little rant about that again. So she winds up leaving. Jane comes in, and he does wind up telling her that they were looking into Zoe. She apparently took her jet out that night. Everything, they're supposed to be checking it out, I guess, back in LA. So I don't know if she's done something. We don't know, because she was pretty pissed off when she left. And he's telling her again how bad he is for her. And I'm like, he been saying this all the time, And she feels like he probably is bad for her, but yet she's still here. So she don't want to let him go. She okay with dealing with the consequences. Okay, cool. That's the risk. You can get hurt. And if you're okay with that, then hey, it is what it is. Paige wants to play Monopoly, and they're having a good game, and Rochester actually wins, and it shocks her, because she's normally the one that wins, but she didn't react like she didn't have like a level 10 meltdown. She didn't do that. It was more so like, oh, you beat me, I'm shocked. But that was kind of it. um Jane gets a new phone, the latest iPhone. It of course feels so foreign to her at first, but then she gets used to it real quick. She checks Facebook. She sees these messages from Noah saying, call me right now. If you don't, I'm flying out there, coming out on the next plane to Maine. And so she calls him, and he, of course, is freaking out. She tells him what happened, and she makes the mistake of saying that someone set the fire. And at first I was kind of like, was it a mistake? But I think it really was in her instance, because she started thinking about the fact that she no longer had, none of her belongings. The one picture she had of her dad, she was telling him about the fact that it burned. And I think she was just, it came out. I will give it. At first I was like, now why the hell would you say that to him? But being the state of mind that she was in that moment, she did say it, and then she immediately regretted it, because it was like, God damn it, I shouldn't have said that. Because he, of course, is freaking out, and he's like, you need to come home, and all this type of stuff. We'll figure everything out once you get back. But I'm like, that sounds really good, but how the hell she's going to get there? Because she doesn't have anything. Everything burned in the fire. There's no ID. There's nothing. So I'm like, how is she supposed to do that unless Rochester's going to, like, have a private jet take her back? I don't know. So she winds up hanging up with him. She goes to, because she has to get off the phone because it's 8 o'clock. Her shift's starting, to watch Paige. So Paige, of course, is not in her room. And I'm like, God dang it. Here she go again with this hiding shit. And she finds her in the basement. She's crying. And Jane comes and, puts her arms out to her. And she just holds her. And she cries. And she's like, I don't want to die. And she's like, I don't want you to die either. And she's like, what's going to happen if both of you die? Who's going to take care of me? And it breaks her heart that she has to hear this, and tries to reassure her she's not going to die. She's going to get older, And then the girl says, the lady in the long white nightgown, is she going to come back? And Jane's like, what lady? And she says, the lady in the white nightgown that used to walk around the house all the time. And I said, oh my gosh. I don't think it's a ghost. So Rochester's having to do all this different stuff dealing with the insurance company. He wanted to just pay for it himself, but because the house is in a trust and the trust is Paige's, he's got to follow like certain rules. So he's got to deal with the insurance company. Jane and Paige are outside. Later on, they come in. Jane talks and tells him what Paige had said about seeing a woman on the beach, and her, she told him what she saw as well. And they know it's not Marjorie, because Marjorie's a redhead. So he's trying to make excuses, saying, it could be other people on, from other, ends that are on the beach, or whatever. And she's just kind of like, this is a hell of a coincidence. And then he tells her about what the fire chief said about Emily not possibly being dead. And that had already been in her brain anyway. But of course, hearing it, that someone else is thinking this too, it spooks her out even more so. He then tells her about the connection to Joe Causey and how that's Emily's younger brother, how she was like really protective of him and stuff like that. And that, of course, Joe blames him for, her winding up with Rice, and again, her dying, so it's his fault. Then apparently Joe Causey's been like trying, blowing up the lawyer for them, saying, he needs another interview with Jane and needs to talk to Paige. And so they're going to have to set it up. He doesn't want her to have to do it. But at the same time, this is some weird shit going on. So it's like, you know what? Let's just tell it all. Let's just say what's going on. So they finally get it set up, the interview, aka interrogation. uh Joe Causey, I'm sorry, Paige goes in first, and then after that she does seem upset. Mateo's gonna take her to get some ice cream, and Paige promises her, "Listen, I'll be waiting for you outside by the door when you come back." Um, so then Paige goes, not Paige, I'm sorry. So then Jane goes inside, and there's another detective in there, a woman named Detective Moss, and the attorney who represents her, per Rochester, and him, they're in there as well. And off rip, they ask about the woman that they allegedly saw on the beach. She tells him what she saw, what Paige saw, and how she thought it was, quite a coincidence that they both saw the same thing. And so then Causey goes in on her, and he's like, that doesn't mean anything. And then Jane is like, I'm sorry, not Jane. Rochester's like, why aren't you looking into Zoe? And he says, we already did. He's like, I went out there to LA, and there's footage of her being where she said she was. And he tells Rochester, so I guess you trying to throw us off your scent and didn't work. Then he tells her that a few days before the fire, Rochester changed his will, giving her billions, which she didn't know anything about. And she says, I didn't know anything about that. And he, of course, is like, yeah, sure. So now you're trying, he's trying to give her a motive of why she would have done this. And Rochester's about to lunge at her. And, I'm sorry, at Joe Causey. But the lawyer stops him. He's like, don't, you know? And the Joe Causey guy just keeps going in, saying all kind of horrible things. He says to her, how many times did you have to screw him for those billions? You must have some really good pussy. All kind of fucked up shit. So the lawyer's like, I don't think the police chief would like hearing how you're treating a witness. And he says he realizes he's been recording him. He's like, that's illegal. You have to let me know when you're recording me. He's like, there's a sign when you walk in that says you might be recorded when you enter the inn. So then he shut the fuck up. But I'm like, oh yeah, this is a good lawyer. And so now he's scared because his ass might get in trouble, you know. He does say to her, like, we don't when we get enough evidence, like, we're gonna come and we're gonna arrest you. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is not someone who should be in law enforcement, you know. He is not stable. So he winds up, you know, eventually leaving. And my thing is, he shouldn't even been on the case. Like, he clearly is too close to it. Yeah, it's a small town, but you're not going to tell me there were no other fucking detectives, because there's another detective sitting in the room. So right there, it was a conflict of interest, and he shouldn't have been involved in it. And whoever the police chief is trash. Poor Jane, she's pacing back and forth in her room. Rochester comes in, and she's like, I didn't do it. I would never do that. I would never hurt you or Paige. Would never do that. He's like, I know you didn't do it. He's like, it's just Causey trying to get to me through you. So then she's like, she doesn't want to think too much. Like, she doesn't want to think. She's like, I need you, please, please. He's like, no, tell me what you need. She's like, I need you to help me not think. So then they have this like hardcore fuck session. He makes her suck him off. Super erotic scene to read, I must admit. And then he like eats her pussy, and he writes a message like on her clit as he's for her to, but she doesn't know what he's writing because the girl's too busy coming. And then afterwards, she asked him before they started fucking, like, what were you writing? And it was, don't leave me, please don't leave me. So then afterwards, they have their hard fuck. He comes inside her. Next day, she gets ready for the day. Jane goes in where Marjorie is in the kitchen. She's making waffles. Paige wants some, but of course she wants it drowned in syrup. She has a coffee creamer like hazelnut. She's never had this before. And she absolutely loves it. Um, they're going to go outside. Paige goes out first, and then they hear this scream. And so she rushes outside. Rochester rushes out of his room because he heard it. There is a dead rat in a pool of blood with a note attached to it that just says Jane. So this, of course, scares her, but she's trying to calm Paige down. She's like, it's okay. Everything's going to be okay. She sees a different type of fear in Rochester that she hasn't seen before, and it does terrify her. And so he's like, let's go back inside. You know, we're going back inside now. Afterwards, it's just Mateo and Rochester, and they're talking, and Mateo's like, you got to send her away. Like, there's no more trying to keep her around. Like, this has gotten to the point to where if something happens to her, even if legally it won't be your fault, morally it will be. And you're never going to be able to recover from it. He's like, I know, I just don't want her to leave. But he knows he's got to do it, so he winds up going up to her. Paige is laying on her lap. She's asleep. And he tells her it's time for you to go. And she's thinking like, okay, we'll go where? And he's like, going back home. You're going back to Houston. So she eases Paige off of her and they leave, and she tells him, I'm not leaving. He says, yes, you are. I've already called the agency, told them you're terminated, and sent you the full amount of the money for the whole year. Booked a flight back to Houston. Like, that's it. And she's like, I know you love me. He says, I do love you, but that's why I'm doing this. He says, people that I love, they always wind up. No, he says, people that love each other don't always wind up being together. And that's a real truth, you know? It really is. That's just, it don't always pan out. And so she doesn't say anything at first, but what she does say to him, when she could kind of regain herself a little bit, is that, oh, I see what it is. You think there's a possibility that your true love, Emily, is alive, and now you want to send me away. And so she goes, she packs her stuff. Well, she didn't want to take much of it because she's like, it's not mine. And he's like, I'm not going to leave you. You know, I don't want you leaving with nothing. But he's already given her all the money, so technically she's not leaving with nothing, you know. You know, she can go buy whatever she needs, you know. But this is happening. She's leaving. She's back in Houston. She's at the airport. Before she left, she did tell Paige goodbye. Paige was kind of stoic because she didn't understand like why this was happening. Um, but she did tell her bye. So that was a sad thing to read. She's at the airport. Noah comes and she's like, what are you doing here? Because he's supposed to be working. And he's like, well, you gave me your flight information, you know. She's got sunglasses on because her eyes are puffy. And he, of course, is like, you know, do you want to talk about it? She doesn't want to have a breakdown in the airport. Poor girl. So she's trying not to talk about it. She just says, you know, I got terminated. Like, that's it. And he's just like, you know, well, that's good because you didn't need to be there. And some other crap. And she says, you know, I got attached because he was starting to do that whole rant about rich people. And she's like, honestly, I don't want to hear that right now. Like, I went there. I got caught up. It's over. I'm never going to see them again. And he starts talking about, you know, the power dynamics and all this type of stuff. When he realizes they clearly had a more intimate relationship than just, you know, boss and employee. And I mean, yeah, I get it, that dynamic. Yeah, but based upon how she felt, she doesn't feel taken advantage of. And I kind of got to go with the person that is in it. So if she doesn't feel that way, then she doesn't feel that way. Um, he starts talking about how, you know, she really doesn't belong here either. Like, she's always been too good for this place. and all this type of stuff. And I'm like, but why are you saying this to her? Because all it does is solidify that feeling she has of, I don't belong anywhere. I don't have a home. And I know he knows that complex she has. So it kind of irked me that he was saying this stuff and that he was like happy about the fact that she was back, because even though she deserves more, I'm still happy that I get to have you in my life. I don't know. It just seemed very selfish. And I don't know. I ain't too big of a fan of him either. I'm not. So I didn't like his statements. It was just kind of trash. And she feels, even though she's back in Houston, she feels like her home and her heart is still in Maine. We switch back to Rochester. Paige is so hurt she hasn't moved from the spot where she saw Jane leave. He doesn't know what to do. He just waits there with her. Because it's like, what else do you do? So after about an hour and 20 minutes, she breaks, starts screaming, crying. And she's yelling. She promised she wouldn't leave. And he tries to explain. Sometimes people can't keep promises. Things happen. She's like, but why does she have to go? And he says, we had to keep her safe. She's like, why couldn't we keep her safe here? He's like, adult situations and stuff like that. So then there's a vehicle coming up. Margie winds up taking Paige inside. Excuse me. He thinks it's Mateo, but it's Joe Causey. He comes up looking pale, looking really off. And he's just like, what else do you want? She's not here anymore. You don't have to use any more scare tactics, leaving dead rats and notes and stuff like that. And he's looking at him like, what are you talking about? And he drops the bomb. Emily's alive. Apparently, a bakery owner has footage of her. And so she is very much alive and well, and apparently doesn't want to be found because they put out an APB for her and haven't been able to get her. So now Rochester really is freaking out, because now this puts custody of Paige in jeopardy, because this was based upon the fact that she was dead. Well, if she's alive, he's going to lose custody of her. Like, what's going to happen? This puts a lot of crap in the air. And I mean, technically, we don't know if she's his daughter because the DNA test hasn't been done. But he feels like she's his daughter because of the time and everything that they've spent together and how he's grown close to her. So this is just going to be a whole ass mess. We switch back to Jane. She gets back to her place. Noah was like, do you want me to stay with you? She's like, no, go, I'm fine. So she's got a lot of roommates, but no one's there because it's like midday. So they're probably like in school or working. And so she goes to her room. There's someone sitting at her desk, and it is Emily Rochester. And she says, hello, Jane. And that's how the book ends. So the next and final book in this series is called Best Kept Secret, and we are going to dive into that next week. What did you all think? Did you think it was Emily from the get-go? Or did you have some other suspicions? I couldn't float, but I was floating between Emily and the Joe Causey guy. Like, I'm like, it's got to be one of them. Then I kind of thought maybe Mateo. Like, I didn't know. Sometimes people harbor resentment towards you. You never know. So I was like, I don't know who it could be at one point. But as we got closer to the end, I'm like, oh no, this is Emily. Like, this heifer is alive and well and wreaking havoc. So let me know what you guys think. Drop down in the comment section. If you are in the market for a beautiful notebook or journal, I do have those available, and those links are going to be available down in the description below as well. Make sure you like and subscribe and share. As always, I truly do thank you all for your support, and thank you for tuning in to the Always Reading Book Club.